The fog came first, not the gentle kind that slowly drifts away with the morning sun, but a thick, suffocating veil that pressed down on the fields of Lorraine and swallowed the landscape whole. Roads vanished. Tree lines dissolved. Distance became meaningless. Inside that white emptiness, engines moved low, heavy, deliberate. German tanks advanced unseen, and American soldiers on the ground sensed their presence long before shapes emerged from the mist. War had taught them that sound often arrived before sight, the rumble of tracks, the metallic echo of engines working under strain. In the fog, those sounds felt closer than they were, turning every second into anticipation and fear. Somewhere ahead, steel was moving, and once it broke through, there would be no time to react. On a muddy strip carved into the countryside stood a tiny liaison aircraft. Fabric wings stretched thin over a light frame, a modest engine, a machine designed to observe, not to fight. Its purpose was simple: fly low, watch the battlefield, report what it saw, and stay alive by being overlooked. Its pilot, Major Charles Carpenter, was never meant to shape the battle below him. His role was to witness history, not interfere with it. But that morning, Carpenter sat in the cockpit with a plan no regulation supported and no instructor would have approved. Bolted to the wings of his aircraft was something that did not belong there. Something improvised, controversial, and dangerous. In a war dominated by armor, artillery, and air power, Carpenter was about to test whether determination and creativity could challenge raw force. The fog still clung to the ground, and what waited beneath it was about to change everything. The fighting around Arracourt had been unfolding in fragments rather than in one decisive clash. This was not a neat battle with clear lines and predictable movements. It was chaos stretched over days, sudden thrusts. Armored columns, appearing, disappearing, and reappearing somewhere else. Villages changed hands, not over weeks, but over hours. Weather shaped every decision as much as strategy did. German armored units pressed toward the American 4th Armored Division, using the fog as cover and momentum as a weapon. Panther tanks, with their thicker armor and longer range, represented a terrifying advantage. For American Sherman crews, the math was brutal. German guns could strike first, and often did. The fog reduced visibility, neutralized long-range coordination, and turned engagements into sudden, deadly encounters. American tankers adapted or perished. They hid behind rises in the land. They waited in ambush. They relied on coordination, speed, and courage to compensate for what they lacked in protection. They fought for minutes because minutes mattered. Every delay forced German commanders to reassess. Every stalled advance bought time for reinforcements or repositioning. Above them, liaison aircraft traced slow circles. Their pilots became the eyes of the battlefield. They saw columns forming, routes being chosen, and danger approaching long before the ground units could confirm it. Their radios carried warnings, coordinates, and pleas for support. Carpenter saw everything. He watched German armor gather strength. He watched American positions stretch thinner. He watched moments when a single disruption might save lives, and with every pass, the same realization returned. He knew what was coming, and by doctrine, he could do nothing but report it. That knowledge weighed heavier than fear. Before the war, Carpenter had been a schoolteacher. He taught history to students who knew battles as names and dates, victories and defeats neatly summarized in textbooks. War, in reality, was nothing like the diagrams on a chalkboard. It was noise and confusion. It was incomplete information. It was moments where hesitation meant lives lost. The L-4 Grasshopper was built to be ignored. Small, slow, and unthreatening, it often flew beneath the attention of enemy gunners. German troops frequently dismissed it as harmless. That was its strength. And its curse. Carpenter watched tanks move into firing positions while knowing he could not interfere. He watched American crews scramble too late. He saw how narrow the margins were. How a few seconds could separate survival from disaster. Other pilots had experimented with mounting bazookas on liaison aircraft. Most abandoned the idea after limited success. The risks were obvious. The aircraft was fragile, the pilot exposed. The concept bordered on absurd. Carpenter saw something else. He refined the idea, committed to it, turned improvisation into intent. His aircraft earned a name, Rosie the Rocketer, and with it, a reputation that would soon spread far beyond the muddy strip where it first took off. Still, no one knew what would happen when theory met reality. No one knew if the rocket exhaust would scorch the fabric wings. No one knew if the added weight would compromise control. And no one knew whether Carpenter would survive his first attack run. As the fog began to tear open in patches, the battlefield revealed itself in fragments. Fields appeared and vanished again. Roads glistened under damp air, then armor emerged. A German column advanced steadily, confident in its protection, and unconcerned about threats from above. Carpenter began his descent. He could not attack from safety. The weapons he carried demanded proximity. He had to come close, dangerously close, close enough for rifle fire to snap past his cockpit and for machine guns to rake the air around him. He was not flying like a fighter pilot. He aimed with the entire aircraft, the angle of descent, the speed of approach, the commitment to a single path. The rocket fired. Carpenter did not wait. He pulled up hard, forcing the strained aircraft skyward as tracer rounds streaked past. The moment stretched endlessly, then released. When he looked back, one of the tanks below was no longer moving. More important than the damage was the realization that spread through the battlefield. German crews had seen it happen. They understood. This aircraft was no longer harmless. The sky, once ignored, had become a threat. The second attack came under different conditions. Surprise was gone. The enemy watched. Gunners tracked the small silhouette. Fire intensified. Bullets tore through fabric. The grasshopper no longer flew cleanly. Every control input demanded effort. Carpenter returned anyway. This was no longer fueled by adrenaline. It was driven by conviction. He understood the danger. He also understood that time on the ground was evaporating. Then the radio carried a message that changed everything. American soldiers were trapped, cut off. Heavy support could not reach them in time. German tanks were closing in. Minutes mattered. The reasonable choice was obvious. Withdraw, land, assess damage, preserve the aircraft and pilot. The reasonable choice meant leaving men behind. Carpenter turned back. This was no stunt, no attempt to prove a concept. It was a deliberate effort to disrupt, delay, and intimidate, to fracture the rhythm of the German advance long enough for others to escape. He attacked again, and again. Each pass drew heavier fire. Each return reduced his chances of survival. The aircraft absorbed damage. Controls grew sluggish. The engine strained under conditions it was never meant to endure. Still, he pressed on. On the ground, German crews hesitated. Columns slowed. Formations scattered. Confusion replaced momentum. Those moments bought at immense risk gave trapped Americans a chance to move. Even if he saved them, the question remained. Could he still make it back? After that day, Carpenter became a legend in real time. Reports credited him with tanks destroyed and vehicles disabled. Some numbers were confirmed. Others remained debated, blurred by distance and fog. But the effect was undeniable. Before Carpenter, liaison aircraft were background noise. After him, they were engaged immediately. German units adjusted their behavior. They watched the sky. They prepared. One man had forced an enemy to change its habits. That achievement carried a cost. Near the end of the war, Carpenter was diagnosed with a serious illness. Doctors offered grim expectations. He returned home, returned to teaching, returned to a life far removed from tracer fire and engine strain. Years passed. Predictions failed. He lived longer than expected. He taught history, not as theory, but as lived experience. His aircraft faded from view. Rosie became a rumor, a footnote, a story told without proof. Until decades later, when the trail resurfaced, The aircraft had survived. History had simply misplaced it. This story is not about clever engineering or reckless bravery. It is about refusal. Refusal to accept helplessness. Refusal to watch without acting. Carpenter was not ordered to attack. He was not required to risk his life. He had no guarantee of success. He chose to act anyway. And sometimes, it is those quiet, desperate choices made far from headlines and far outside regulations that leave the deepest mark. A small airplane refused to remain small, and that was enough to be remembered.